Welcome back, Careblazers. In today's video, we are going to be talking about an important topic, executive functioning. Maybe you have never heard of this term before, but I can almost guarantee that you have witnessed problems or difficulties in executive functioning with your loved one with dementia. So today we're going to talk about what it is, why it's important, symptoms that your loved one might be struggling with this area, and what you can do about it. So let's dive in. Executive functioning, that responsibility of the brain is housed in the frontal lobes of the brain, the largest lobe of the brain. And in a way, you can think about it like the CEO. So executive functioning, chief executive officer, you can think about it like that. This part of our brain is responsible for managing tasks, coordinating things, juggling multiple pieces of information, planning ahead, being able to focus attention, staying on task, all of those really high level things that we do as human beings. That's our executive functioning at work. So when we think about a really great CEO and all of the things they're able to do and maintain and manage and control, that's really what our executive functioning is doing for us. So our brains have four lobes. We have the occipital lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the frontal lobe. So today we're really honing in on those frontal lobes. When someone starts to have problems with executive functioning, things that used to come second nature to them all of a sudden will become more difficult. So for example, let's say your loved one was always a really great cook, made dinners every night, people complimented how great they were as a cook. If they started to have problems in executive functioning, the way that could show up will be, sure, maybe they're forgetting parts of the recipe. But more importantly, with the executive functioning, it's going to be they can't keep track of the order at which the recipe goes in, or they can't do multiple things at once where the water is boiling, and while the water's boiling, they're prepping the veggies over here. It's just too many things going on at once. So they'll start to have problems in that way. Or let's say your loved one has always been pretty organized throughout their life. Executive functioning problems might show up as all of a sudden they're no longer able to stay organized. Maybe they're not able to plan their day. They're forgetting tasks and details they would normally never forget. They're having trouble arranging appointments, maybe double booking themselves. Or another way that executive functioning problems can show up in dementia is more social behavior. So there are things socially that we do to be socially appropriate. So if we're in a quiet library, we know that we can adjust our voice to be more quiet because we understand that environment requires a more quiet voice. If we were to start having problems with our frontal lobes and executive functioning, we might not recognize the environment and we might start speaking loudly or even yelling.
Stop talking!
Another way it can impact social behavior would be maybe we would say something out loud that we would normally not say out loud to somebody. We might think it, but we wouldn't say it.
Kiss me!
So this is where sometimes you might even notice with younger kids, they might say things like, "What's that thing on your face?" or "Why do you look funny?" Not meaning to be mean, but they just don't grasp the concept of maybe what's socially appropriate yet.
I'm mad at you! Die!
That's kind of how it can be when somebody has problems with executive functioning in dementia as well. They don't recognize maybe what is socially appropriate. I remember once when I was working in home-based primary care, so we would go out and see people with dementia in their homes. One guy had so much trouble with his executive functioning, and he would just blurt out and say all kinds of things. I remember feeling so nervous going to see him, like, what's he going to say to me today? Like, what's the thing, that he's going to say? And I remember one time he'd comment on people's appearance and maybe the weight that they were. And, his wife was just always so embarrassed or appalled that he would say these things to people. And so we had to work with the wife in terms of this is just that part of the brain is really struggling. Here are some ways that you can adapt. So specifically with something like that, You could consider alerting anybody coming into the home for the first time that your loved one has this condition. They might say things that are unexpected or say things that might be typically rude or socially inappropriate, but that part of the brain just isn't working anymore. So that might be one way to handle the social awkwardness part of executive functioning difficulty. Now, as we know, there are multiple different types of dementia: Alzheimer's disease, frontotemporal dementia, vascular dementia. It is possible for somebody to have problems with executive functioning in all of the types of dementia. So somebody with Alzheimer's disease absolutely can start to show problems with executive functioning. We certainly would expect to see problems with executive functioning in frontotemporal dementia, meaning the frontal lobes and the temporal lobes of the brain are impacted primarily in frontotemporal dementia. And so because the frontal lobes are primarily impacted, we would certainly expect to see executive functioning problems in that type of dementia for sure. Now, it's probably pretty easy for you to think about some of your loved one's behaviors and figure out whether your loved one has problems in this area or not. Maybe they're interrupting people all the time when they're trying to talk, or mixing up their medications, can't plan them right, mixing up bills. All of these things are executive functioning problems. But when somebody's getting tested for dementia and they go through formal neuropsychological testing, we do have tests that look specifically at this ability to see how somebody is doing. So some of the tests would include things like, can they withhold saying something when they see something? So like we would test a bunch of words that are like, they have a name, and that name is in a certain color. And a test might say something like, tell me the color of that word, but don't say the word, just as an example of what could possibly happen. And so they would have to be able to think and look at a word. Like, for example, let's say the word is cat and it's written in blue, and then the word dog is written in red. Well, they might have to look at that, and instead of saying cat or dog, they might have to be able to say red or blue. That's a higher level task. You basically have to inhibit the initial response and do the response we're asking for. That's one formal way that executive functioning could be measured. Another way would be something that we call, it's like cognitive flexibility, the ability to be flexible in your thinking. So sometimes there's a test where somebody might have to connect some dots, but they don't just connect the dots like with just numbers or just letters. They might have to go back and forth between numbers and letters. And so they have to remember, like, they can't just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have to go 1A, 2B, 3. So that would be an example of a way to measure somebody's cognitive flexibility and being able to keep that multiple pieces of information in their mind at once. Another way, so some people might be really familiar, for example, with the clock drawing task. Well, there's different instructions for that task, but one of the ways we would measure executive functioning would be, how did they approach the task? Did they approach the task in a well-organized, planned out manner that would allow adequate spacing between all the numbers? Or did they just start numbering? Like, I've seen many clocks. In fact, I'll put some patient clocks up here where they just started numbering. And so by the time they got to the number 12, it's not evenly spaced. So they didn't plan it accordingly, versus somebody who maybe has pretty good executive functioning would know to do the anchor numbers first. They would know to do the 12 and the 6 and the 3 and the 9, and then fill in the numbers in between, and everything is evenly spaced. Another way would be looking at the time. So I would personally always give a time that there's the right way, but then there's also the concrete way, which would mean somebody would have maybe suggest difficulty with executive functioning. For instance, if I gave the time 10 past 3, right? Put the clock hands at 10 past 3. What time would that be? That would really be 3:10. However, somebody with executive functioning, maybe more concrete thinking, executive functioning difficulties, they would do it 10 minutes after 3. Technically, right? Like, okay, we could see how they would come up with that, but that's the concreteness. There's so many different tests. And, please forgive me if I'm being a bit vague or not using the very specific ways we would test, because it's important we keep neuropsychological tests secure, because once people find out the specific names, or they can look them up and learn, and then the test security goes out. So we have to keep tests secure. It's actually professional ethical standards mean we can't actually share all of the details of all of the tests. And when you see people do that, that's actually not a great thing. But with all of the tests that we give, There's all these different ways we're measuring for different functions of the brain. I know a lot of times, I'm getting a little bit off topic, but this is important. A lot of times when people go and get neuropsychological or geropsychological testing, from the outside perspective, the observer, they might be thinking, what does this have to do with dementia? What does this have to do with how I function in my day-to-day life? These tasks seem silly. Specifically, tasks maybe like repeating a bunch of numbers or drawing a clock or putting blocks together. But the thing is we are looking for, not only does that person get the correct answer, are they able to come up with it, but we're looking for how they approach the task, how they're thinking through the task. This is letting us tap in to all the different areas of the brain and what those areas of the brain do. And that's what the assessor is looking for when they go through this. So in a nutshell, executive functioning is the highest level of functioning that our brain really does. It sets us apart from all other mammals in terms of the level that we can think and how we can plan and coordinate and put all these pieces together and do this higher level thinking. And many people with dementia struggle with this, and it can be incredibly hard for the family members and professional caregivers even to witness and be around and know what to do. As I've mentioned before, if your loved one has more of the socially difficult problems with executive functioning, educating people who come around a lot about that symptom can be helpful. Sometimes people carry little cards. I know I have some that they could just pass out if, in passing, if maybe the loved one at the checkout counter said something maybe offensive or rude, and, the clerk is left like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Without causing a scene, you can walk away and just hand the card that says, my loved one has a brain condition, sometimes says things that are unexpected. Thank you for understanding. We can do things like that to kind of help the situation. Other things that you can consider doing is just trying to keep things as much of a routine as possible, breaking things down in as many small steps as possible, giving only maybe 1 or 2 steps at a time, depending on what they're able to do. Using visual clues can be helpful. Also, minimizing just how much information or things they have in front of them can be helpful. I know a couple weeks ago, we did a video on more of the kind of magnetic behavior where somebody with dementia might just see something and grab it. That's also an indication of executive functioning problem, but they might grab somebody else's fork or somebody else's drink. All of that is certainly a sign somebody's having a problem with executive functioning. So long-winded, I hope this helps you. Do you think your loved one has problems with executive functioning? And I'm guessing you could probably tell in your day-to-day life, and you didn't need to go through formal testing to know it, but I'd be curious either way if you found out through formal testing or if you could just observe your loved one and see that they have trouble with this. Careblazer, I'm sending you so much love. If you haven't already, you can hit the red subscribe button on your screen. It's 100% free. It lets YouTube know that this information is helpful for people who are similar to you, which means YouTube will likely put this video in front of another caregiver somewhere in the world who is searching for information about dementia caregiving, and they don't know where to go and they don't know we exist yet. So things like that really do help. I appreciate it. Also, if you're looking for more guidance, feedback, direction, and community support, so rather than just information, if you're looking for more information and help and guidance on what to do with this information, what to do with your loved one's specific symptoms, I'd really encourage you to check out our Care Collective program. It's where we come together every single week with Careblazers all around the world to talk through how to handle the most difficult moments of caregiving in a way that supports your loved one, gives them the best quality of life, helps you make the best caregiving decisions possible, but also helps you take the best possible care of yourself in the process. That's what our Care Collective program is about. There's a link below this video. You can check it out. I am sending you so much love, and I will be back next week with another video. Bye.
Also, Nico gets a belly rub for every person who subscribes from this video. So if you haven't already, click the red subscribe button. It's totally free, and Nico says thank you very much.